When we listen to the radio, we never agree on the station.
Classic rock.
Hip-hop.
Pop! Guys, quiet. The one thing we do agree on, we all want an awesome free phone. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 free phones of your choice from brands you love, like Samsung, Motorola, and LG when you switch. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Free phone requires port. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good afternoon, kids, on a Monday, actually sunny afternoon in Wisconsin, which, as we all know, is almost impossible these days because I'm frightened to say it's probably winter or the start thereof. So I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. Want to start off real quickly, a couple announcements because I know that David is holding, so we're going to try to keep him short and sweet in terms of having to wait for me. Just a couple quick things and reminders. This is I have 2 shows today. Obviously, David is my first guest, followed up by Laurel. Both are authors, and I could not be more excited since I'm an author myself, so this will be a thrilling afternoon for me. Want to remind everybody I have a double-decker tomorrow. Our rescheduled show with T. Sean is happening at 1 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock we're going to be having the owner of Blunto Cards, which we were supposed to have last week and unfortunately got rescheduled. So that's tomorrow, again, a double-decker. We're looking at 12 to 1 and then 1 to 2. Wednesday, I'm featuring Michael Gross, who is a self-life improvement coach. He is at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. Thursday, if I could get my days straight here, we have a double-decker once again. Dura, which is another author, is going to be on at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. And, of course, the illustrious Curvy Girls line rep herself, Patty Hughes, is going to be on at 2 o'clock Central Standard Time. And then we round up the rest of the week on Friday at 12:30 Central Standard Time with the girl that most of you are so excited to see. Margaret Joseph of the Real Housewives of New Jersey is going to be coming on the show. We're going to be talking about life, love, her collection, you name it. So, just as a heads up, that's a total of 8 shows this week. Just to remind everybody, after that, yours truly is taking a break. Well, I wish I could say a life break, but a break from radio. As most of you know, I have this health issue I have to take care of, so clearly it's going to demand some shifting around. So I'll be back on air on the 28th, and that's another one of my special guests as it relates to the Scientology film that I'm about to be doing. So I'm really excited. Anytime I get to talk to anybody about CTE or Scientology, I'm pretty pumped up. So I'm absolutely excited. So without further ado, and by the way, just to let everybody know, check the Sins Chat Corner page on Facebook. Then you'll be able to go ahead and tell when all of these shows are happening. It'll have a nice description, contact information, the whole 9 yards. Also, and then don't forget to go ahead and check out The Art is Alive, Magic and Indie Films that I just made yesterday. That's the calendar coming out next month. Okay, I think that's all of our announcements. Without further ado, let's get to David and start talking. Hello, David.
Hey, how are you?
Well, I just had to go through all those announcements, so I'm so sorry to keep you holding like that. But when the weekend's gone, it's kind of like, yeah, you got to go through all that technical stuff and tell everybody what's happening with me. And I'm terribly excited and very frightened of you. I won't lie. When I started to research you look very intense. You're very well versed. You're very accomplished, and you look very intense, like you would almost kill me, like in one of your books. And then I got very nervous.
No.
And I'm thinking, holy hell, what is this guy going to be like on my show? So I've tried to prepare so that you have no reason to yell at me or not like me or turn me into a character in one of your books, because I could see that happening.
Well, what I always say is that people who write books like the books I write, we get it all out in the book. So in real life, we're nice and well-behaved and mild-mannered. So that's really who I am.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad that you've decided to come to the show. As I said, I'm always excited because I'm a writer myself. I sadly have not done what you've done yet, which is I've written everything under the sun except for an actual novel involving characters. I'm not great with character development. I can write a movie, I can write a play. I can't do it in book form. I don't know what it is. But eventually, one day I'll get to that point where I write a graphic novel or something. Probably not as extreme as yours because we're going to get into all the various themes your novels have. But I want to start off being very basic, if you don't mind. Obviously,
okay.
David you weren't always a best-selling author, and you weren't always who you were right now. I mean, I think in spirit, obviously, we're all authors to start with, but Let's go way back in the beginning and when you were first young. I love to talk to people about some of the reasons why they began writing and, more importantly, some of the people that kind of helped to excel their passion and purpose, meaning were there particular writers that you admired? How did all of this start for you?
Well, when I was a kid, my parents both read all the time. So I grew up in a house where there were always books and magazines and newspapers, and my dad read a lot of fiction. He read a lot of mysteries and spy novels and Western novels. So it was just kind of there in the atmosphere that reading was a normal thing to do. So I grew up reading all the time, and my parents took me to the library and to the bookstore all the time. So books were just a normal thing in the house, and I loved books as objects. You know, I just loved the idea of these things, you know, with covers and things that smelled a certain way and whatever. And so I fell in love with reading first. So then at some point, I kind of was putting together this idea that there were people who were writing these books, you know, that on the other end, somebody had to write the book, and that these people were doing this as a job. Like, that could be your job, could be to sit down and write a book and then send it to a publisher, and someone would send you a check or whatever. And so at some point along the way, that idea started to take root in my mind of, hey, I could maybe do this as a job someday, because I didn't have any other skills in life. I didn't have any other abilities. So I had to figure out something to do. So that started to occur to me as I got older, as I got into high school and college, like, this could actually be a job for someone to do.
And of course, as you know, you're obviously not 20 years old anymore, and neither am I. So clearly we're both a little bit older in the game here. But back in the day, I can remember reading, even as a young child, some of the, like Judy Blume was a huge influence among many, many others. Were you more of the suspense type as a child as well, meaning that's kind of what led you to the path that you're on now? Or were you more geared to a different genre and kind of switched gears as you got older?
Yeah, I don't remember. Well, you know, I read the Hardy Boys when I was a kid, so that was mystery. Definitely, you know, heavy mystery stuff then. But I also read books I really fell in love with when I was young were more fantasy. I mean, I remember reading The Hobbit when I was a kid and just loving that. And I remember reading the school library when I was in grade school had a version of King Arthur and his Knights that was, you know, adapted for young people. And I remember reading that over and over again. So probably the earliest stories I read and loved were fantasy, you know, dragons and knights and things like that, with some of that, you know, Hardy Boys mystery stuff thrown in. It was probably only a little later, like, you know, when I got into high school, that I started thinking about some mystery writers. You know, I read John D. MacDonald when I was in high school. I can kind of remember starting to read John D. MacDonald and people like that. And, of course, Stephen King, because everybody read Stephen King. So those were some of the early ones I read who really got me excited about reading and writing.
And what I find so interesting, too, is when you're a child, you read a book and your interpretation of how things is so very blanket, if you will. It's almost like a blank canvas. And then as you go along and you continue to read and write, that canvas tends to change a little bit, which I find so unique and interesting. You were educated, and quite educated, I have to say. Not only does he have a BA, but he also has a master's and a PhD, which is thoroughly impressive, and way more educated than I am, I have to say, and most of us. So we always ask this question on my show. There are some writers that are out there that have an enormous amount of education that thoroughly and consistently will say to other authors, you know what, you need to pursue as much education, continue that education as possible relative to your craft. Then there's some on the other side of the fence that will say, you know what, sometimes a mixture of some education and life experience works. Now, looking back at things now, would you still advise individuals to take your path, meaning get more and more and more educated over time?
Well, I don't think everybody has to get a PhD. I mean, I don't know how much that necessarily helps someone become a writer. I think getting an education, going to college is a worthwhile thing. If I were giving some young person advice, I would tell them to go to college, but it would be as much about the life experience as it is about the classroom experience. I mean, I think that's why people should go to college, is, you know, and I would encourage people to go away to college. You know, I would say go away, live away from your family if you can afford it, and it's harder and harder to afford it. I understand that too. But to me, that's what college is about, is the life experience, that you live among people who you wouldn't ordinarily live among, and you get the sense of who a lot of different people are and a lot of different things in addition to the education. So I would always come down on a combination of some education, some classroom, you know, book learning kind of stuff is fine, but life experience is very important. I took 5 years off between finishing college and then going back to graduate school, and I lived a few different places, and I worked some lousy jobs, and I think that was beneficial. I think it was beneficial to get out in the world and see how the world works and learn, and that helps you kind of figure out what you want to do with life. If you have to work some lousy job somewhere, you know, then you say, well, maybe I want to pursue something else in life, and I don't want to do this, or you come to understand the kinds of things that other people experience in life because you work alongside them. So yeah, I think a combination of book learning and education along with real world experiences is pretty essential for everybody, and certainly someone who wants to be a writer.
No, definitely. I would agree with that without a doubt. And I know that you act as an associate professor in the English department, so I want to ask you, when you're mentoring and speaking to students in terms of English language, I believe, and this is just my belief as a writer, that learning English language is one thing. Learning technique and training as it relates to writing is two different things. So how do you advise your students, like if they come to you and they're intrigued by the English language, but more importantly, they want to use it within the course of writing, what are some of the things that you share with them, or some of the things, or tips, I should say, that you've learned about making English language work for you in the written form, let's say, you know, not just a novel per se?
Well, I think that whatever someone is trying to write, whether it's just someone who's trying to get through school and, you know, write papers and research papers and whatever, or someone who's going to go into business and write memos and reports, or someone who wants to be a novelist or whatever, I think it's absolutely essential that people read a lot. I think that the more someone reads, in fact, I would say that's pretty much the most surefire, best way to learn how to write is to read a lot. So I would tell students and anybody, just read a lot, and read a lot of different stuff. Read nonfiction, read fiction, read the newspaper, read magazines, whatever. I don't believe, I don't like it when people say, you know, like, oh, what do you read as a guilty pleasure? I don't think there's any such thing as a guilty pleasure. I think if you're reading a romance novel, or you're reading a mystery novel, or a Western novel, or whatever, you're learning about the language. You're learning how words work, and you're learning how to use words, and you're learning how to spell, and you're learning how to speak, and all that. So to me, the number one thing to do is read. I'm always shocked because sometimes I'll have students who come to me and they'll say, oh, I want to be a writer. And I'll say, well, great. Like, you know, what kind of stuff do you like to read? Who are some of your favorite writers? And they will actually say, oh, I don't really read a lot. And I think to myself, how does that work? That's like saying, I want to play music for a living, but I don't really listen to music. I mean, you wouldn't say that, you know.
Right.
So you know, if people can read, the more you read, the more you absorb the way sentences are put together, the way stories are put together, the way words work. That's number one, is just read a lot.
Well, and the other thing, too, I think is if people want to, and someone asked me this the other day, and I wanted to pick your brain on this, if people want to get just a better grasp, actually someone said, how do I get a better grasp on the English language? And I know this might sound geeky, but my particular method is I love the thesaurus. Not so much the dictionary. For some reason, I have an affinity for using the thesaurus. So oftentimes I will just go through and read the thesaurus, literally read the different words and try to get a better understanding of language. Do you believe that there is other ways for someone to strengthen that skill if they're interested in doing so?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that. I can remember, I haven't done it for a long time, but when I was younger, I would page through the dictionary and just look at unusual words or surprising words. I think, I remember when I was a kid, my parents got Reader's Digest, and Reader's Digest always had that vocabulary quiz in the magazine every month. And they would have words and definitions, and you had to pick the right definition, and then you can go in the back and score, how you did. I think anything like that, doing those kinds of quizzes and crossword puzzles and things where you come into contact with different words. I think, the other thing that I worry that people don't do as much now, and I'm going to sound like an old man when I say this, is are people talking to each other enough? Because there's so much texting and emailing and all that kind of thing. Are people not just conversing? I mean, there's something to be said for having a conversation with someone who's smarter than you, or someone who knows about something that you don't know, someone who's older than you or wiser than you or whatever, or just someone who's different than you, and just hearing how does somebody else talk? How does somebody else use language? What kind of phrases do they use? What kind of colorful metaphors do they use? Especially if you want to be a fiction writer and you're going to be writing, or a screenwriter or whatever, and you're going to be writing characters, you want to hear how people talk. And so I think, people go sit in a coffee shop or a bar or something and just listen to the way people talk. Listen to the way they use language, engage in a conversation with people. Who knows what you're going to learn or what you're going to hear when you do that.
Nice. Or I always say sometimes the mall, like mall walking or mall sitting, that sort of good stuff, State Fair, whatever have you. But I agree with you.
Yeah,
I think there's been a disconnect, because now we have so much social media. We have all these other ways where you can communicate. So people will text instead of call. People won't go to the post office to mail a letter anymore because it's all done electronically. It's kind of sad, actually, to tell you the truth. So right. I still prefer to do handwritten cards, and I do, love letters on occasion. So I'm pretty old school that way. But that's great advice, actually. Thank you. I have to ask this question because remember when we started this interview, he said, I'm not a scary person. And then I do a little bit of reading, and then I come to find out that you do daily walks in the cemetery. And that kind of creeped me out. I was like, okay, I've never talked to, nor have I ever met an individual who actually walks to the cemetery for any reason ever, let alone beneficial reasons for writing, etc. So tell everybody why you walk around the cemetery, because that's kind of creepy, isn't it?
Well, I live right by a park and a cemetery, and the park and the cemetery are right next to each other. So you can walk through the park, but if you want to extend your walk a little bit, you can cut through over to the cemetery, and it makes your walk a little longer. And it's a beautiful old cemetery. With lots of old trees and beautiful old headstones and statues and things like that. And so it's very peaceful. It's very peaceful to walk over there. So, I mean, I'll be honest, I like cemeteries. I think they're cool, creepy places. But so really there's a benefit to that, is that there's a reason for that, which is I am trying to exercise and stay healthy. I'm trying to stay out of the cemetery as long as possible by walking through the cemetery and exercising. So I'm doing both things at the same time. I'm appreciating nature and I'm seeing the leaves change color and everything. And then I'm reminding myself that someday we'll all be here in the place very much like this. So, it all works together in some way.
That was very well put, actually. I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, I tend to stay away from it, too. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of creepy, et cetera. But it just willies me out. Even when I walk through it, I'm like, yeah, this isn't really surreal. It's just kind of scary for me, but I get it. And I just had to ask it. I'm like, that's really cool, actually. And I know you live in Kentucky. I have never been to Kentucky, so I said to myself, I should ask you what great benefits there are so that I can maybe be intrigued to visit Kentucky, because I'm like, it would never occur to me to go there. So I'm curious how you ended up landing there, because you aren't originally from there. So how'd you end up in Kentucky?
Well, I just ended up here because I got a job here. I'm a university professor, and when you look for a job as a university professor, you really can't be too selective about where you end up. You just have to apply for every job you're qualified for, and then hope someone likes you. So I just ended up in Kentucky for my job. But this is the town I live in, Bowling Green, is a nice little town. It's a college town. The benefits of living in Kentucky are that there is lots and lots of bourbon. If you like bourbon, there's lots and lots of bourbon. Lots and lots of horses, if you like horses. Lots and lots of water. Kentucky has lots of ponds and lakes and creeks and rivers. And it's not a highly populated state in terms of, people occupying a lot of land. So there are lots of parks and state parks and trails and things like that. So you can get out into nature very easily. And I only live an hour from Nashville, Tennessee. So if I want to go to the big city, I can just drive an hour and I can be in a big city and do all that kind of stuff. So really it's kind of, and the cemetery's right down the street. So so I really have just about whatever I would want here.
That's very cool, actually. And I like one of those things that I happen to be looking at some of the various places that you are online, obviously. And one of the cool things that you do, and kudos to you on this, because I do this too in different forms, Movie Monday, which I think is so cool. I was going down and reading the various Movie Mondays that you were doing, etc. Now, does that mean that you're just a big movie buff, or you like to just write about movies? Do you do film reviews? That's one of the things I do, actually.
No, I don't formally do them. I just, my wife and I love movies and TV shows, and so we pretty much go to the theater to see a movie at least once a week. That's just like the thing we do to get out and get away from the computer and have fun, is to go to a movie and talk about it. And so so that's why I just write about the movie that I saw over the weekend, because what I find is that people don't always know what's in the theater or what's going on or what's worth seeing. So I'm just offering my opinion as just a lay person, that what movie I like or what movie I don't like. So it's just a fun hobby for me. But I mean, obviously it's about storytelling too. We will go, my wife's also a writer, so we will go and we will watch a movie, and then we will discuss, I thought it worked, that they did this, or, it was kind of boring here, and, they could have told the story better in this way. And so it is kind of a learning experience too. But more than anything, it's just what I enjoy doing.
And that's absolutely awesome, as a matter of fact. I had to ask this question because of all the various novels you've done. I'm curious, or is it in the works, or have you considered making any of your books into films? That seemed logical to me.
Well, I'd love to see one of them made into a movie. No one has seriously pursued that option yet. People talk, almost every book, someone comes along and they talk about it, and they're interested, but it's very hard to get something like that off the ground. So no one has been really serious enough about it to make it happen. But if they're out there listening, or if you know somebody, send them my way. Yes, make something into a movie. Sure, as long as it's like a cool, some cool college professor or something in the background. Yeah.
So you're going to become a real Stephen King. I noticed that because he always plants himself, as you know, in his films, which I think is cool. And I had to ask that because, that's a lot of what I do. Actually, a good portion of what I do is now moved into the entertainment sector. So I represent people. I write screenplays. I just had an entire film festival, literally, where I showed nothing but independent film. So I was thinking about you today. I was like, why does this guy not have a screenplay written, and why is this not made into a movie? It's not as hard as you think it is. Trust me. I mean, that's not to downplay it, because I see my friends work very hard at this, and it does take some revenue and it does take some attention. But your content is strong and it's original. I mean, obviously every author has original material, but your material is intriguing and provocative, and it is mystery thriller type, but in a different. It's not your same old, do you know what I mean? And you could put a niche on that.
Yeah.
So I strongly encourage that. I'm big on that on this show. Get out there and make a movie out of one of these. Do it. I'm telling you, I would go see it. only because I know the body of your
them.
work, not all of it, definitely. But we can talk about that. But I just had to throw that out there because I'm huge on that. Because I'm like, what happens if somebody doesn't read your book? What if they walk into a movie theater and they can still see it? Then you're touching even more people. I'm big on that. I'm like, you can write something, but if somebody doesn't buy the book, then they don't get to see it. If you take it to a movie level, then people get to see it. And I see that you like movies, which is really cool. So I have to ask you, because your wife, 2 questions about your wife, because we always like to talk about the personal side of things on the show here. First of all, is she a creative chameleon like yourself? That's what I call anybody who's able-bodied in the creative world, meaning is she an author, painter, any form of artistry? And then second of all, have you based any of your characters on your lovely wife? I never get to ask authors that.
Oh, okay. Well, she is a writer. She's published a book of short stories, and she's published a memoir, and she's working on another novel right now that she's about to send out into the world. And now she has, in the past, she majored in fine art in college, so she's done more painting, and she worked as a graphic design, so she does have that kind of background that I don't have. I mean, she has a very good eye for, arranging furniture and picking colors, and she picks my clothes because she says, like, oh, this is in style and this should go with this, and I have no idea. So she has that kind of background, but mostly she's just a writer now. So she is one of those creative types. In terms of basing a character on her, I mean, I've probably borrowed aspects of her many times, just like I borrow from everybody. And she's a great resource if I'm writing about a female character and I want to know, would a woman say this? Would a woman wear this? Would a woman do this thing or not? It's nice to have my wife in the house, and then I can just ask her, would a woman ever really do this? Or she will just read the book and say, oh, come on. No woman would wear this to this event, or no woman would say this to a man, in this situation. So we do that for each other, I think. So that's always a good thing to have someone around who you can trust to read your work and give you some honest feedback about it.
You bet. I agree with you there as far as that goes. And if I understand you right, because she is also a writer, I'm going to assume that you haven't collaborated on the project yet together? Or have you? Because sometimes writers will get together and they'll do that as mates.
We have not necessarily written something creative together. We've edited a couple of anthologies together, so we worked on that. We certainly bounce ideas off of each other. When I'm trying to plot a story and thinking of ideas, I will certainly run things by her. Hey, what if this happened? Hey, what if the character does this instead of that? Or if I'm stuck, I might go to her and say, I'm trying to figure out how to get the character to go from, here to here, and then, she'll give me ideas and we'll brainstorm ideas together. So we've done that. In terms of like sitting down and writing something together, no, we haven't done that. We write different things, and maybe it's probably healthy to not collaborate that much, to have some part of our marriage that is not about writing a book. I don't know. You never know. It could happen someday. We'll see.
Gotcha. Just thought I'd throw that one out there. I thought to myself, well, yeah, that's kind of sometimes people can do that, and sometimes they like that little time where they're doing other things, etc. So that's kind of cool, actually. I have to give you big kudos because, folks, if you have not looked at his Facebook page, and of course I scrolled quite a bit, obviously, but I saw the Flaming Skull shirt. That is so badass. I was like, that just didn't, I was so impressed by that. I'm like, an author who has flaming skulls on his person could not be better than that. I'm like, oh my God. So I know this might sound like a corny question, but I do like to ask people this. If you were to tell your listening audience the perfect environment, meaning perfect place to write, what sort of clothing you wear, and what sort of food there is. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes people write better when they eat certain things, dress a certain way, or are in certain areas. Is any of that true for you?
Right. Well, I do most of my writing at home, so I'm very comfortable at home. And the great thing about being a writer is you don't really have to get dressed up. You don't have to, So, You can sit there in your boxer shorts if you want. I'm not saying I do that. I'm just saying you could do it if you wanted. So that's a pretty comfortable environment. I have my in-laws live in Florida, and we spend a fair amount of time down there, and so that's a nice place to go write for a change of pace because that you can see the water and you can see the birds and you can see those things. And that's a very relaxing environment to write in. So I certainly enjoy writing in that environment. In terms of food, I'm trying to eat healthy. So, I have to be careful with what I eat, but I have a weakness for, I like toast, in the morning to get myself started with some butter and some jam on it. And I try not to eat too much, but I could pretty much survive on that if I had to. So that's a treat I allow myself in the morning. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love it. Absolutely. Now, I've noticed through the history books, based on researching you, that you've done approximately one book a year for umpteen years now. And so I want to talk about that a little bit because oftentimes people that listen to my show are creative of some type. And when they start writing, I think, and I don't mean to downplay this, doing one book a year is quite astonishing to tell you the truth. My last book took me 9 months, so it's a lot, and then promotion, et cetera. So I would like you to talk to the people that are listening in terms of, do you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, I did a book this year, and you're like, I don't know if I have that in me. Some of us have the writer's block thing. Sometimes you run out of content. Do any of these things pose any issues in terms of you consistently and constantly putting out another book? Or did it just kind of end up that way? Meaning, was it coincidental or was it done on purpose, the every year publishing?
Well, I like doing one every year because I like to write that much. That's a pretty good pace for me. It keeps the audience interested. What happens is I'll work for a year on a book. The book will come out, and then I'll start getting messages from people who say, I bought your book the day it came out. I read it in a day or 2 days. When's your next one coming out? So it takes me a year to write it, and then it takes somebody a day and a half to read it, and then it's like, what are they going to do the other 363 days of the year? I tell them they should go read somebody else's book for a while.
Exactly.
But that kind of works to build an audience, to let the audience know, every summer in July there's going to be a new book, and they can look forward to that. I always feel when I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I'm starting to think maybe I'm getting toward the end or something like that, I start to think, well, I have to figure out what I'm going to write next. And when I'm in the middle of writing one book, it can be hard for me to envision that there's going to be another idea or that there's going to be something else that I care to write about that much. It just sometimes feels that way. But inevitably, when that current book is finished, and then it's time to come up with a new idea, ideas are there. I will find that ideas are there. So I think it's good not to look too far ahead because when I'm in the middle of one thing, it's hard to think about the other thing. But when the time comes, it's there. I think having deadlines can be very motivating in terms of avoiding writer's block or issues like that. I think if you know there's a deadline and someone is willing to pay you a little bit of money for a book, that can be very motivating to have you say, gee, I should really get this done because someone out there in the world is actually waiting for this and they want to see it. So I think that helps keep me on track pretty well.
Nice. And it shows, obviously, in the body of some of your work, because obviously I know not everyone has read some of the things that you've done, but it is quite remarkable, a book a year, I'll tell you. And at my age, I don't even know if I could do that, so kudos to you on that one. I know, obviously, that you travel around all over the place in terms of promoting your work. I realized very recently you just did an event in Fort Knox, actually, so I was curious to ask you how the turnout was and how things went there, another place I've never been.
Oh, Fort Knox. Well, Fort Knox has a library on the base. It's called the Barr Memorial Library, and it's a great library. They do great programming there for the folks on the base, for the military people, and for their families. So, and they actually managed to bring a lot of really prominent authors there, a lot of best-selling authors like Harlan Coben and James Rollins and people like Steve Barry, like all kinds of people like that have passed through there. So it's a really good place. And then the other thing they do, the thing I was just there for when I was there a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, is they give a lot of workshops. And it's not just writing workshops. They give workshops on 3D printing and genealogy and whatever else they have going on there. So the last time I was there, I did a writing workshop, and there were about 20 people there on I guess it was a Monday night. A lot of them were high school students. There's a high school teacher there who frequently will bring her students to these events at the library. And these were AP students. So they were good students, good, well-behaved students. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. They were eager to learn. And I hope I taught them something. I hope they came away with something. But it's a great place to go because I've been there before where, active duty military personnel will come in and take a workshop or listen to a reading, or their families or their spouses are writing something and they want to come in and learn. So it's a unique place to go. And so I feel lucky that it's nearby and I get to go there sometimes.
That's very cool, actually. And one of the things that's nice about, and I've taught before and I've done lectures, seminars, things like that, and what's interesting is that they're so captivating. You have such a captivated live audience. I think it's frustrating when you write something and sometimes you don't always get feedback, and you've had a tremendous amount of feedback. I've read a number of your reviews. But sometimes it's nice to have that immediate gratification, like the person's there and they're listening and captivated and asking questions. That's awesome. And I love the fact that you've traveled around all over the place. That's amazing. I found it interesting that you've had your books translated into multiple languages, and I assume obviously not only is that a reason for marketability, but you as an author, why was it important to have this translated? Did you want to broaden your audience, or is there a foreign connection, et cetera? Because a lot of times I know it's marketability, but still not everybody has to translate theirs. So why the decision to go that route?
Well, for me, it's just if there's interest, if you can find other readers somewhere, then why not? I mean, I think that's what all authors want, is to find an increasing audience for what they do. When books of mine were first translated into other languages, it was just this mind-blowing thought that, like, someone in another country is going to read my book. Someone in another language is going to read my book. How bizarre is that to think about? How mind-blowing is that there's enough interest that someone wants to do that. And it's still a thrill. I mean, I think just recently I found out that one of my books was going to be translated into Russian, and I was just like, how wild is that? That it will be in Russian, that it's been translated into Chinese, and so it's just like, that's just amazing that someone in another country might wander into a bookstore or go online to a bookstore and order a copy of my book and read it in their language. I have no idea if it's a good translation or not because I don't know any of these languages. But it's just kind of a thrilling thought to think that the work is going out there to other places that I couldn't have imagined and places I haven't been, people who have very different lives than mine in some ways.
Sure.
It's a lot of fun to think about.
I bet. And it's got to be a huge oh, my God. Do you ever look at all of the success that you're garnishing and think to yourself, God, how did I get selected? You're so grateful because obviously this isn't coincidence. Clearly your work and all of the sweat and tears and the whole 9 yards that we all put in pays off in such multitudes of ways. But the fact that you've gotten out there in such a big way to so many households, to so many heads, to so many hearts, how does that feel?
Obviously, it feels great. It feels great to know that the books are going out there. If I see my book in a bookstore or in Target or someplace like that, it's amazing. It's amazing to think about. It never gets old. I think anybody who has any measure of success in anything, you do have to be a little lucky. I mean, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. You've got to find someone. In my case, I have an editor who likes my work, and so she was there at the right time and read my book at the right time and wanted to work with me. So there are so many variables that go into someone having any measure of success, that it's hard to even comprehend. Sometimes any kind of success seems I think there's always just an element of mystery to it, because you can say there are only so many. There are things you can do to try to get people to buy a book. You can advertise, you can put it in a store, you can go on social media, you can give interviews, you can do whatever. But there are books that people do that for that don't sell anything. And there are books that people do that for that sell millions and millions of copies. And so there's just always this part of it that is just this weird, unknown chemistry, synergy between a story and a reader and a time and whatever when somebody finds a book and decides, or a lot of people find a book and decide they want to read it. If everybody understood that intellectually, then every book would be selling lots and lots of copies. But that doesn't happen. So that mystery part of it is kind of frustrating on the one hand, because you want to think, gee, we ought to be able to figure out why people want to read one book and not another. But at the same time, that's kind of part of the ride, is this idea of, well, I don't know how many people are going to buy it. I don't know how many people are going to read it. I don't know if it's going to do well or not. It's scary, but it's also kind of the fun of the roller coaster ride.
Oh, I believe that, definitely. And one of the things that I noticed, and this is important to talk about because you on one side of the fence are a writer, but there are also other services that you offer. What I thought was really cool is that you're not limited, meaning that just because you're in Kentucky, you can't work with somebody who's in Washington or Chicago, et cetera. So we want to talk about some of the services that you offer in terms of, because you're able to Skype, correct? So if somebody comes to you and they want to solicit you for services, you can do this via other methods besides being in person, correct?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to do is if a book club somewhere reads one of my books, and they have a group of people together in their house or whatever, I'm willing to Skype or FaceTime with them while they discuss the book, and I've done that for people all over and for all my books. Each of the books comes out with a reader's guide in the back, book club discussion questions, and a lot of book clubs don't even need those because they just have their own discussion. But yeah, I'm happy to do that. That's one of the things, again, we complain about social media and technology, as I was doing earlier, but here's this remarkable thing that if you're a writer or if you're a reader, you can actually get in touch with people and see them face to face and have a conversation. So yeah, I'm wide open to that. If somebody reads the book and they're going to have a group of people together, let me know and I will try my best to schedule it so that we can talk about it.
Nice, very nice. So that opens up your ability to be able to help others in multiple places, which is absolutely awesome. One of the other cool things that I saw about, and I can't remember specifically when it happened, but you had taken profits from one of your books and donated it to Hope Harbor. And I think that's important because that's relative to sexual assault. And obviously that's quite the predominant, sadly, topic in today's society, and it's been in the news quite a bit. So I wasn't sure if you had a personal angle there, or what brought you to want to work with Hope Harbor?
Well, it's just that I've lived here in Bowling Green for, I'm trying to remember, 9.5 years now. And I've been really fortunate. I've been fortunate to live here. I've been supported by people here, people who buy my books and the libraries and the bookstores here and everybody. So I just think that in any walk of life, if you have a little success, it's always good to try to give something back. I know it sounds like a cliche to say, oh, you should give back, but it's true. There's truth in that cliche that I think you should try to give something back, especially if you live in a community and you're a member of a community, you should try to do something to help out in that community. So Hope Harbor is just it's an amazing organization here in Bowling Green where they help people who are surviving and trying to move on from sexual assault and sexual trauma. They work with the individuals, they work with their families, and so it's unfortunately we need that resource, but it's a wonderful resource that is here in Bowling Green. And I have written books that, kind of touch on that. I write books about missing women and people who disappear, and I write about some violent, difficult subject matter sometimes. So I thought, here's a way for me to give a little boost and a little attention to an organization that is really on the front line and doing good work. So what I did was when I gave my reading, my debut, the launch of the book here in Bowling Green, if someone bought the book at that event, then I donated the cover price of the book to Hope Harbor. And so it was just a way to say, I'm here and I benefit from being in the community. Let's try to help other people who are doing good work in the community. Their work is much more important than my work. They're really trying to help people in a way that I can't. So it's worthwhile to support them.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And kudos to you on that. I'm always thrilled when we have authors that partner up with nonprofit organizations. I think that's wonderful. So that's terrific. Now, I've noticed a predominant theme, and some of you who may not have listened or actually have not read any of his material, I noticed that there are 4 predominant themes. There's usually death, distress, murder, missing persons, 1, 2, or all 4 of these elements. So that's pretty dismal content there. And so I've always been curious to ask this, and Stephen King, if you're on, anywhere listening to this by some odd chance, please come on my show so I can ask you this too. Those that work and live in that dark realm, as I call it, when they're writing, I don't know how to get there, to be honest with you. That's one of the things I've challenged myself to do this year, is to go to a darker place to try to write. Where does some of this come from? Meaning that, how do you go to that? I can only imagine it must be very hard to go to a place that's so sad and dark and hopeless. Do you know what I mean? I'm just trying to figure out your mindset in terms of how do you go there, and so successfully, I might add.
Well, I think that, like anything else in life, if you're a writer, you have to be true to yourself. You can't really fake it. So we all look at the world a certain way. Like, for instance, you mentioned Stephen King. Okay, so if Stephen King were walking down the street, and there was a plane crash or something horrible happened, he would write, a story about, there was a demonic clown, or there were, weird aliens took over the plane or something like that, and that caused it to crash. If Nicholas Sparks was walking by the plane crash, he would see that and he would say, I bet there were lovers who were separated by the plane crash, and I'm going to tell their story of how, they were destined to be together, but the plane crash kept them apart, or whatever. So we all look at the world a certain way, and we're all drawn to certain kinds of stories, and we really don't have much of a choice except to tell the stories that are interesting to us. If we write something that's interesting to us, then it's probably going to be interesting to somebody else. If I tried to write, I don't know, if I tried to write, Harry Potter or something like that, it probably wouldn't work, because that's not the way my imagination works. So we just have to write the stories we're drawn to, and I've always just been kind of fascinated by missing persons cases and murders and kidnappings and things like that. And so I just want to write about them, and I don't know why. It's kind of a chicken and egg question. I mean, what comes first? Do you just have this innate desire to read about certain things? I don't know. I mean, I'll say this as well, that what I try to do with my stories is I do try to inject a little bit of hope in the story. I mean, I am writing about these difficult things, But I'm also writing about people who are dealing with these difficult things, and to some extent or to a large extent, they're overcoming those things. So I always try to say that there's some kind of element of all of us. Everybody in life has awful things happen to them. I hope not as dramatic as having someone kidnapped or whatever, but that does happen to people. But we're all overcoming something. So my characters are overcoming stuff. We're all overcoming stuff. And so to me, the overcoming part is the most interesting part of the story.
Very nice. I love that. That's an excellent explanation. And it's intriguing, too, a lot of times. I mean, I love that. It seems to me, maybe it's just me, but the mystery/thriller thing is a genre that's kind of underexposed as it relates to Hollywood film nowadays. Like, my kids are excited to see Murder on the Orient Express. I don't know why, but they're, like, thrilled because it reminds them of Clue. And I'm like, I just don't think there's enough murder, mystery, thriller type movies being made out there. So it's refreshing to see that it's still in book format, for instance, some of yours. I know that you've done a total of 8 novels, and so there were 3 that stood out in my mind. First of all, let's talk about the most recent, which was Bring Her Home. I believe that just came out in July, actually. So if you don't mind, to those that don't know anything about Bring Her Home, if you could provide a short synopsis of the book, then let us know how it's been doing since it came out, because now July to November, I would hope by now you have some idea on how things are going.
Okay, so Bring Her Home is the story of a father, and before the book starts, his teenage daughter and the daughter's best friend have disappeared, and they've been missing for about 48 hours. In the very first chapter of the book, the girls are found in a park. One of them is dead. One of them has been beaten beyond recognition. And he is summoned to the hospital. He finds out his daughter is alive, but she's in a coma because she's been so severely beaten. He has no idea where she's been. He has no idea how she ended up in this park. He has no idea who has done this to her. And he can't communicate with her because she's unconscious, and no one can communicate with her. So he kind of has to take it on himself to try to retrace his daughter's steps and what was going on in his daughter's life leading up to this attack to find out what really happened. And as he puts these things together, he starts to find out things that his daughter was involved in, things that were going on in the town that he did not know about, that are shocking to him, and that's where he finds the answer to what happened to his daughter. So it's really a story about a father and a daughter. How far is a father willing to go to find out what happened to her? And can they, and so he's a father and she's a teenage daughter, so that's a tough time. Right. That's a tough relationship, parents and teenagers. Yeah. Can they work through all that and get past all that they find out about each other in the course of this book?
And I love the relatability factor there, because all of us at one point in time or another have all thought about what if something awful's happened to my child, et cetera, et cetera. So I love that. The other 2 ones that stood out to me are what I call the girl novels, The Cemetery Girl and The Forgotten Girl, obviously. I find the Cemetery Girl in particular just seems to intrigue me. I don't know why. And I've read bits and pieces, but I haven't been able to get through one solid book of yours. And it's not due to lack of interest. I'm literally just so busy that I just haven't been able to read enough myself, which I feel badly about. So my question to you is, you seem to circulate yourself around, and this is just in my opinion, some of your characters, just in reading them and then some of the reading that I've done, you bring about some very strong female characters that I've noticed. And again, I haven't read all of your work. So I want to ask if that's coincidental or on purpose in terms of do you enjoy making strong female leads? And out of the 2 books, if you wouldn't mind asking, I would like to finish one. So as the author, which would you suggest, Cemetery Girl or The Forgotten Girl?
Well, it's hard for me to pick which one is the best, because it's like saying, which is your favorite child. I don't have any children, so the books are my children.
I know.
But they're both good. They're both good in different ways. Cemetery Girl is the first one I did for Penguin Random House, so it's kind of like the first, so it kind of has that sentimental value to it. But a lot of people love The Forgotten Girl. That one is still selling and doing well. So
really.
So take your pick. Yeah, it is doing well. So, but in terms of writing about women, first of all, I don't sit down and say like, oh, I'm going to write a strong female character or a strong male character or whatever. I'm just trying to create characters, and I don't want to write about the same character every time. If I just wrote what I knew, if I just wrote about my, people who were like me, I would just write a bunch of books about, middle-aged college professors who don't do anything but walk in the cemetery and go see movies. So if I want to get out and write about different people, then I have to write about people who are different than me. And so that's why some of the books are told from the point of view of women. Some are told from the point of view of men. Sometimes there's the point of view of teenagers and younger people in there. And it's just, for me, that's just the fun of being an author, is writing about a lot of different people and people who aren't exactly like me. I can certainly say I've been surrounded by strong women my whole life. My mom, my older sister, my wife, my agent, my editor, my mother-in-law, lots of people in my life are strong women. And so I think that you're just as likely to get a great story out of with a woman in the lead as you would with a man in the lead. So to me, anybody is fair game to write about, and anyone is fun to write about.
That's so cool. I absolutely love it. Now, I don't want to forget to remind everybody, the upcoming event is the Kentucky Book Fair, which is November 18th from 9 to 4 at Alltech Arena. Are you there just for the day, or is that a weekend event? I couldn't tell, so I wanted to clarify that.
Oh, it's just one day. It's all day Saturday. Okay. It's a giant room full of a bunch of authors, and I will be at a table signing books all day. So if you're anywhere near Lexington, Kentucky, come by and say hi.
That would be so awesome, actually. Are you going to have, you're going to have all different versions of all the different books, or are you going to have the most recent one?
They'll certainly have Bring Her Home, but they usually have at least some of the older titles. So, yeah, somebody can come. The holidays are coming up, so there would be nothing better than to buy the entire David Bell collection and just give that to somebody for the holidays. Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, whatever you want to do. Arbor Day, Valentine's Day. I'm firmly in favor of that. Any day. Yeah,
That's so awesome. Well, look at that. I managed to survive almost an hour with David Bell. He didn't kill me. I don't think he's going to make me into an awful, creepy character. I don't think he hates me, so that's a good thing. I want to go through a couple quick things here before I forget about this. I'm going to read off a list of places where people can find you, and when I get done, just let me know if I've forgotten anything, if you would. His website, it's davidbellnovels.com. He is on Facebook with the same name, his professional page, David Bell Novels. Same thing with the Twitter handle, same name, as well as on Instagram. He also can have his products, I should say, are found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, PenguinRandomHouse.com, and of course he has a Wikipedia page, even more impressive because I don't even have a Wikipedia page right now. Any other place where folks can find you or your materials? I mean, there's a slew of them, obviously. If you just Google his name, David Bell, you'll be able to see that. But any of the main ones or anything that maybe we should mention that I've forgotten?
You pretty much covered it. My books are in Target. You can find them in Target. Target has been very, very good to me. So if you're in your neighborhood Target, right now there are 2 of my books in Target because they reissued one of my older books, Never Come Back, with a brand new cover, which is an amazing cover. So you can go into Target and get 2 of them 20% off right now. So check that out.
Absolutely awesome. Now, just as a heads up to you, in about 2 hours or so, or I should say tonight, we'll be going ahead and sending over the archived copy of this because there'll be a copy on Blog Talk Radio, and then I upload the interviews onto YouTube as well. So you'll have a copy in both different places, of course. I obviously want to say to you what I have always said to most authors, which is please come back anytime you'd like if you enjoyed your time with me, only because of the fact that we want you to be able to promote anytime you like. I am going to send over my contact information because I work with so many filmmakers and people in the business. I really do, and I mean this in all sincerity. I would love to be able to see you take this to the next level. I think at least a few of your books would be definitely film-worthy. So just give it some thought. I mean, I won't be hurt either way, but I'm more than happy to help. I think that would be lovely. Definitely.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It was wonderful.
Definitely. Thank you.
I mean, I think we should get together. I think we should try to work something out. And I hope I did you justice and that you don't end up killing me in some book somewhere ever.
Well,
you were
talking about writer's block and needing to come up with that idea every year. So I might be sitting there one day and I might say, "There's this radio host. She might have to go."
God, I hope not.
Because I got to come up with an idea this year.
I'll pray. I'll sit here and I'll hope and I'll pray and hopefully things. Well, yes, you do. You never know. But it was absolutely enchanting to meet you, definitely. I'll make sure I send that info along, mull it over, let me know your thoughts. That would be great. But don't be a stranger. Please know you can come back anytime.
Oh, definitely. I had a great time. The hour just flew by.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I try very hard, definitely. Yep. So I'll be in touch shortly. I'm on to my next interview. Laurel's on at 2 o'clock. It is 2 o'clock. So I got one more interview and I'm all good. But thank you, my dear. It was a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. See you later. Okay.
Have a great day,
Bye-bye.
dear. Bye-bye. Tell me he wasn't absolutely phenomenal. So I'm just going to take 2 seconds here to say before I forget, don't forget one more time, davidbellnovels.com. The website includes absolutely all his contact information. He was absolutely lovely. And if I just couldn't get one of my fill today, I had to have 2 fills as it relates to my authors today. So without further ado, instead of having Laurel wait, we'll get her on the line. We'll start talking about her wonderful works. And just when you thought David was phenomenal, just wait till you listen to this story. I'm so excited to talk to her. See, Laurel?
It is.
Gosh,
Hi,
I'm so nervous. I'm more nervous to talk to you than I was to talk to David, believe it or not. This is fun.
Why?
I like having authors because you look very scary, and I mean that in a very nice way. I've been looking at your pictures and researching you, and you scare me. I mean, you're very intimidating in a good way. I mean, not in a bad way. Like, you look like you could probably kill me. I mean, but on the book, I'm certainly not in person. Like the last guest, same thing. I'm afraid of you people. It's mega talent. That's what it is. When you talk to somebody that beholds a lot of talent, it's like totally intimidating. I'm like, I'm just a little author here with my few little books, and then everybody that comes on my show is spectacular. So, hi. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
We have a lot of ground to cover. Well, I do enjoy doing authors, and I think that, and I hate to say it, but it's true. In my industry, oftentimes, I've noticed that I work with filmmakers, I work with authors, I work with artists. There's a lot of competition out there, and I don't have any kind of ego. So I enjoy promoting other authors, especially ones that are more accomplished than I am, like you. Actually, most of the people that come on my show are better. That's pretty honest of me.
Yeah, it's very generous because there certainly is a lot of competition, and there's only, when you're doing literary stuff, there's only a few seats at the table, and so it can be can be a little,
You bet. No, I agree. So that's why I offer a platform and a very open one to people, because they should come on. They should talk about their work, their writing. Words are magic, and if people don't know you exist, they won't know what you've created, and then they're missing out on something very beautiful. So I'm just a facilitator. That's really all I am. But, we're going to get into talking about a couple of different things. The first thing I want to talk about is obviously the intimidating personality, which is, if you look at her pictures when you see her, and I've seen you in different places on social media. I've seen you in the front of the covers and the books and things like this. So I see a lot in those eyes and that face of yours. So I think that a lot of you comes out in your writing. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about was it seems as though a lot of the heart and soul of you as a person goes into you and your prose, so to speak. Would that be an accurate assessment?
I think it's a very generous assessment. I guess in some ways I kind of wonder how it could be otherwise. Maybe if I was writing genre fiction where you really are following, and I don't mean this as a criticism, I mean as a compliment, if you're following a formula that really works for you and it's very much not about you and very much about a super strong character that you've created over the course of many novels or whatever. But I think particularly when you're working on literary fiction and very much character-driven fiction, it's almost impossible to not have your characters, express certain sides of yourself. And frankly, that's the fun part of writing, is exploring different alternative ways of being and thinking in the world, and in that way, different sides of yourself and aspects of yourself.
Oh, you betcha. And I think that it's intriguing, of course. First of all, when you look at doing the various genres of work, how did you end up plopped where you were. Like the last author that I was speaking to does a lot of mystery and thriller, and you, of course, are in a different genre. I believe a lot of your work, I haven't figured out the term for it yet. I was trying to think about it before I was interviewing you. But how did you end up, meaning as when we all start off, were you reading a whole lot and writing as a whole lot as a child? I mean, obviously I know your educational background, but when you first started out, when you're little, is this something you wanted from little on?
Yeah, I think I would have to say yes. I mean, I think that my genre, just to answer that question, is called literary fiction. And all that means is that the story is important, but actually the writing and the craft of the writing is equally as important. You know, the structure of the sentences, the word choices, all that sort of thing. And so you can focus on the writing as much as on the story itself. But I think like a lot of people who get into literary fiction in particular, you know, as a kid I read a lot, and books gave me a lot of comfort, and they gave me a lot of solace, and they fired my imagination, and I had kind of a rough childhood in a variety of ways. And so it just became something that I wanted to do because it really helped me so much, you know. And I would say that I wrote my whole life, you know, from very, very early on, whether it was journaling or little poems in grade school or all those kinds of things, and short stories flowed from there, and then all the rest.
And that's interesting that you touched upon that, because I like to ask this question. In fact, I've made this assertion a number of times, and some people agree and some people don't, which is I think some of us creatives, because I'm an author myself, I think that some of the best works, period, artistically, in whatever form you're using it in, come from what I call that culture of chaos, meaning that I had a tumultuous childhood myself. And so I think that the more tragedy one lives with, I think there's more triumph as it relates to creatively and artistically. Would you say that's true?
Well, I think that that's a classic approach, you know, is to turn your pain into art. You know, comedians do it, artists do it. I think it's a very wonderful way to cope, and it's also a very wonderful way to give back things that you've learned and lessons that you've learned yourself as you've struggled through things and gotten on the other side of stuff. So I think it's absolutely true. If you've had a difficult childhood or challenges in life and you have an empathetic side and you have a reflective side, I think that it's natural that those things try to find an outlet, you know, if you're somewhat introverted like I am, you know, you don't necessarily find that outlet by going on stage. So it's going to be more something that's more contemplative, like writing or painting or something along those lines.
You betcha. Actually, I find it surprising that you're introverted, to tell you the truth. In fact, I would have thought you're the ultra opposite. Literally. When I was reading all this, I thought, oh, my God, she's got to be out and about and everywhere. Because I know that you're in public doing all sorts of things relative to your career. So how do you handle that? Meaning, if you're more introverted by nature, how does one push themselves to be more friend-friendly, sort of open to being out and about all the time? Because you have to be with the success you've gotten.
Yeah, it's, I mean, one of the things I think I really learned, I don't know if you've heard of the book called Quiet. It's about introverts and extroverts. And she makes a really important distinction that being introverted is not being shy. And I'm definitely not a shy person. It's just that introverts get drained by being around people, so they need to then go into solitude and be alone and recharge that way. So that's what I do, you know, very carefully. I mean, I teach writing. I also teach dog classes. And like you said, you have to get out and about to promote your work. And I've done a lot of public speaking, and I'm fine with that, and I do corporate communication. So, but I think that part of it is looking at it as a job. And so at a certain point in time, if you're going to go to the effort to get published and to put your work out in public, you have to be willing to say that the world is going to criticize me. And the world is going to, you know, plenty of people in the world are going to hate what I do, and maybe if I'm really lucky, some people will like it too. And so you have to depersonalize to a certain degree and realize that it's not about you, it's about the work. And some critics make it about you. I mean, I've had, you know, people on Amazon, reviewers, say things like, this author needs to do therapy, or, you know, really cruel things. But you have to be philosophical about it and just say, you know, that's that person, that's not me. And, oh, by the way, what makes you think I haven't done therapy?
Oh, my God, that is so funny. I mean, and not from the standpoint of, I mean, I think we're all our own worst critics. So when you hear something like that, I don't know that that's necessarily helpful all the time. But I suppose it's part of the gamut. Now, you mentioned the corporate communication things, which is one of the things I like talking about, which is, as I mentioned to David before, you're not just an author. You're all sorts of other things that come along with being a writer, clearly. And so corporate communications is intriguing to me because the society we live in has changed, meaning technology is different, how we communicate with one another is different. So I have to ask you, this trend in technology that we have nowadays, which involves less talking, less human communication, less hands-on, and more tech-savvy stuff, is that really the way to go in corporate or really any kind of communications nowadays? I mean, I know they say it's so successful, but frankly, I think we're taking a step backward. Does that sound archaic?
Well, I think both is true. I mean, I think that it's like anything, communications has become sort of like fast food, and there are people who will take the time to get the fresh vegetables and chop them slowly and find fresh herbs and all that. And in some ways, because things have speeded up so much, that when you do get a window where you can go a little bit deeper and add a little more value, it actually stands out quite a bit. But it has everything has sped up and shortened up and tightened up, and it's a very different world. I mean, when I used to do corporate communications and brand consulting, and when I got into it, I've been into it my whole life, but when I went into being a freelancer about 15 years ago, there was a lot of time spent on doing strategy and getting together with the client and thinking things through, and a project could take months and months. Now you can't take that much time because the strategy will have changed and the market will have changed in that time. So you have to be willing to move quickly and make change fast. And there are still places. I mean, one of my favorite corporate communications projects was for a company, and they were redoing their headquarters location, and they were creating this beautiful garden with all this stonework, and they wanted some sort of brand statements. The cheesy ones are things like employees are our best asset, but they wanted some that were stronger about their philosophy and their mission, and they wanted them to be carved in stone. So I joke that I do every media from fast, super fast, tweets all the way down to something that's literally carved in stone in a garden setting.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's the full range.
Oh my gosh! Listen,
and I have to say, it's interesting. It's interesting that a lot of people say, "Oh, that corporate communication stuff, that must be horrible. You must only do that for the money." But it's not true. I mean, there's really interesting creative challenges in corporate communications, and unlike the literary stuff, you do it as part of a team, which is very interesting and pushes your creativity in a different way.
Nice. Very nice. Well, and I had to ask the obvious question because I work with a lot of publicists who work in those areas, and they talk about these things all the time. So I'm always curious to pick the brain of people who've been doing this a lot longer than I have, clearly, because I dabble in that just a little bit. But I'm telling you, this technology, I miss the typewriter. In fact, I still use a typewriter. Actually, does anybody still use a typewriter? Am I like the only writer who uses a typewriter or like actual pen and paper?
Apparently, Tom Hanks just came out with a short story collection. It's all about typewriters because he collects them. So you are.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I just was hearing about that. He collects all typewriters, and a typewriter. Apparently, there's a typewriter featured in every one of the stories.
That's awesome. I love that. That is so cool. Big kudos to you, Tom, because I'm sure you're listening to the show right now. Wouldn't that be kick-ass? Yeah, but I don't think Tom Hanks is listening to us. But big shout out to you. Love your work. So I've noticed in your past history that you were originally born in L.A., but you've lived in all sorts of different places, including upstate New York City. My home will eventually be New York City, so I'm excited. But I have to ask you this because how long were you in L.A., first of all, before you moved?
The first 13 years of my life were in Los Angeles.
Okay, got it. Well, I'm curious to ask you about this because I have to make a trip to L.A. soon. I don't know what it is about L.A., but those people scare me. I think they're different. Do you know what I mean? Like when you go to New York, and obviously upstate New York is not like New York City. I get that. I don't get upstate very often. I've been there, but you know what I mean? When you're in New York, you get used to their way of doing things, and it's very different than LA. I could tell the minute I went to LA the last time, and I'm trying to prep for this trip and get all excited, and all I'm thinking is, yeah, no, I just want to go to New York. But I'm trying really hard. So I'm like, let's ask somebody who was born there or from there, or do you get back there at all? Because you're a writer now.
Not much intentionally. It's not one of my favorite places on the planet. For some,
that's
some
helpful.
reason that you just for some of the reasons that you described. I think the biggest difference is in New York, people, it's very much what you see is what you get. Nobody hides anything,
Right.
And also people don't show off that much. You can walk by the very best club in New York and never know that you were walking by it. You could walk by the most expensive address, residential address in New York and not know. So it's a funny combination of being very much what you see is what you get, but also not show-offy. And the big name brands you would only know because and the super expensive brands tend to be very subtle, like the little red mark on Prada or whatever. And LA is completely different. It's everything is showy and superficial and out there and not substantive, and everybody's kind of on the move in a different way and on the make in a different way. So I find it difficult as well because I sort of feel like I don't really know what I'm dealing with because people are not that direct or that transparent.
That's a very good answer, actually. Not the one I needed, by the way, because I'm trying to get excited about LA, but I totally understand that, actually.
Sorry about that.
And I see you attended. That's okay. I saw you attended NYU, which is so awesome because I have friends attending right now. One of my friends, his son is actually attending there, and you got your BA in English literature. So this is what we want to talk about. I always like to talk about education because I, of course, did not finish college. I had children instead. And I think that there's this misnomer around about how some people are very highly educated in terms of their field of expertise, and then they continue getting more and more education. So I always like to ask my authors, more education is better, adequate education, or is it more a combination of life and education that suits you best?
Well, I think education, I'm a very firm believer in education because if you're relying on yourself, then you're not necessarily, you don't have a great teacher because you don't have the same experience. And I think it's very common for people who don't have a lot of education to poo-poo it. I'm not saying you're doing this, but to poo-poo it and say, I went to the School of Hard Knocks. Well, I went to the School of Hard Knocks too, but I also went to undergraduate and I also went to graduate school.
Right.
And having good instruction is just excellent and helpful, and it teaches you things that you would never necessarily know, no matter how thoughtful or sensitive you are. Learning craft is different. I don't think you can teach somebody empathy. I don't think you can necessarily teach somebody how to look at things in the world in a sensitive way, but you can teach them how to write a good sentence. You can teach them what a scene is all about. You can teach them the function of dialogue. You can teach them how to craft a plot and a narrative arc. And all those things are really, really important to, having a good book. And you can also teach them grammar. You can also teach the basics of grammar and punctuation. And that's a classic thing that those who screw it up think it doesn't matter. But to me, that's like saying, I think 2 + 2 = 5, and if a mathematician corrects me, they're just being uppity, which is, of course, not the case.
No, I do. No, I understand that.
And, obviously there's people who have not had formal education, but a lot of times when you look into it, certain writers, they have found other ways to get educated. I remember reading, I can't remember which author it was, but he found he was not educated. So what he did was he took the books by his favorite and most famous and acclaimed authors and copied them word for word. And in doing that, he got a sense of the rhythm and got a sense of what they were doing from a craft perspective, and was then able to really take those lessons into his own work.
Ah, wonderful. As a matter of fact, you sound like the type that would have you pursued or studied under other writers, meaning you've taken courses from other ones? Have you had an intention to do so? I could see you continuing on studying with other writers or even collaborating with other writers for that matter.
Well, I have a master's in fine arts from the writing seminars at Bennington College, and that model is a mentor model where each semester you work with one writer very closely, and you work on a project with them and send them your writing, and then they critique it and send it back to you every month. So that is a mentorship model with practitioners. They have a practitioner-teacher model where the teachers are people who are really doing it and living it, whatever the area is.
Nice, very nice.
So I've done that.
She's got all of these.
Then I've done also a lot of smaller workshops, weekend workshops, conferences, things like that, where you're learning from speakers and workshop givers and people of that sort. So, I've definitely continued to pursue lots of education. I love learning from teachers, and I love the process of learning, and I also enjoy the process of teaching and sharing that knowledge.
And, of course, one of the nicest parts about teaching, as you mentioned, is I've noticed that people always have more open minds when they're sitting in a room and trying to learn how to either perfect their craft or even get initiated within the course of it. And they're always very eager minds, which is so nice to have in there as far as that goes. Now, if someone's listening and they've never attended one of these before, maybe if you could sell this point a little bit in terms of, because I know you've done the writing conferences before and other things of this nature, why is it important for someone to become a participant in a platform such as that?
Well, I think like anything, you learn what you don't know. And it's very easy for, like I'm teaching a writing course right now, and it's adults, and you can see them, these writers have gone to a certain level, and they're working very hard, but they feel kind of stuck, and they can't quite figure out why they're stuck or why it's not quite working. So then by sitting down and teaching elements of craft, they have a bunch more tools in their toolkit. If you're only relying on your own experience, you only have very, very few tools. But if you listen to how other people and learn from other people, then they can show you how to use a whole range of other tools to accomplish the same, to accomplish your goals in a much more fulfilling way. It's even, I also do dog training, and it's the same thing. People get very frustrated with their dogs, and someone said to me the other day, I was working through something with their dog, and they said, God, you're so patient. And I said, well, it's because I know it's going to work. And, if you don't have those tools, you don't necessarily know it's going to work, and you're not quite sure where you're going or what direction you're it's like trying to drive without a map. You might get there, and you'll probably get someplace interesting, but there's not as much intentionality to the journey.
Oh, I understand. Well, and plus, too, I was just going to bring up the dog situation, actually. So you beat me to the punch there. I'm curious because we don't have a dog. We don't have a dog in my house because, of course, I'm a busy writer because it was in the beginning I'll do books, and now I'm a journalist, so I do radio, and then I cover all sorts of things. So there's no time for a dog. So I have a cat, which basically, to me, between cats and kids, that's like the equivalent of like 14 dogs, to be honest with you. But I'm curious to ask you, because you deal with people and dogs, which one's easier?
Oh, there's no question. The dogs are super easy. The reason I was very reluctant to get into dog training because of the people, not because of the dogs. The dogs are really, really easy to train and to communicate with once you know the basics of dog cognition and animal cognition and learning theory and things like that, which is not that complicated. But dogs don't have a lot of emotional baggage, and so it makes it very easy for them to learn. They don't hold on to behaviors because they don't have an emotional attachment to the behavior. So if you make jumping on you not rewarding and not work for the dog, and you make it very easy for them to get a reward by sitting instead, they'll give up jumping in about 10 seconds. Whereas people hold on to all that stuff because they have all this emotional baggage to their behaviors.
Right. Oh, definitely. That's why I figured I'd ask that. And, of course, I know that you have dogs at home as well. Actually, you have cats and dogs at home, right? Or has that changed?
I have one of each, one dog and one cat right now, and 3 ducks.
Well, and, of course, she does, in case you guys were looking at her, yes, she has a husband as well. So that
no,
means
I do not
hitting
anymore.
on her.
I actually don't have one of those anymore. That's a recent change.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. That's the foot in the mouth right there, folks. So let's just backtrack on that one. So we have a dog and we have a cat. So I'm curious because I know that when my cat goes to my basement door and senses the other cat, dog, or anything, they're ready to kill one another. So I have to ask how that dynamic works because I know that these animals will kill each other here. So are they just separated, or do they actually get along? Because I've never seen a cat and a dog cohabitate.
Everybody gets along just fine in my house. Even the ducks and the dog. The dog, will chase them a little bit, but they know that she's not going to hurt them. And she even tries to play with one of them. One of them has figured out if she stops, that the dog will stop too. And the dog and the cat sleep together every night. And so a lot of it's just individual personality and also how they're introduced. And then there's definitely things you can do to help the process. That's for sure.
You absolutely, without a doubt, as a matter of fact. Plus, since you brought it up, I guess I probably should ask, will we anticipate getting some written novel relative to your love life?
Relative to my love life? I don't have one of those right now.
Sometimes people have an experience in their life in terms of their personal relationships, and they take it. And, we just talked about this before. A lot of times writing can be great therapy. preach this a lot. I'm like, you should write about it if it makes you feel bad. And I don't do that myself. In fact, I have a very hard time writing about personal things. But they say sometimes if you have a relationship or something major has happened and a change in your life, sometimes it's good writing material. Do you think you might write about your husband or ex-husband at some point?
That's definitely true. My feeling about that stuff is, though, that you need to do the therapy before you write. I mean, you can do therapeutic writing for yourself, which is like journaling and things of that sort. But if you want things to be published and you want other readers to do it, to enjoy it, I think you really need to do the work first, because I don't want my readers to be my therapist. I want my readers to have an experience of their own with the work. But in terms of my personal stuff, I definitely had my personal life is in all my books, because it has to be. It's just it comes out of my experience. So my memoir, Unraveling Anne, is certainly truthful and follows the true story of me trying to understand my mother's life and tragic death. Then my other books are novels, but there is a lot of my personal experience and imagination as well in them. And in fact, I had started a novel about, I call it a marriage book, and so I had started that before my husband and I split, and I've set it aside for a little bit, but I'll probably go back to it eventually.
Oh, I'm sure, definitely. Well, and what's interesting, too, is because you've had experience in this area, and I just clearly admitted this, so let's say there's somebody besides just me that's saying to you right now, okay, so is there a way to pave the course to make it easier for oneself? Like, I start to write about things very personal to me, and my rule is if it starts to make me cry excessively, I'm just not going to write about it. And that's been my rule. And then I just wrote this movie all about my personal life. So I guess I've kind of done that. But to those that are listening in, including myself, any recommendation on how that path can be a little bit easier or maybe just a little less painful for us? Do you know what I mean? I know you have to feel the pain, but how does it get easier?
Well, I think that there's, I think there's writing about it from a personal perspective, which is very therapeutic, where you're not thinking about an audience at all. You're just writing to get your ideas out and to put them on paper and examine them in that way. And so they're not just fleeting thoughts. They're actually in a place where you can review them and reflect on them, and that's super important and very therapeutic and very wonderful thing to do. I don't think that anybody should ask anybody to read that stuff. I think that then taking that material and turning it into an essay, even just a personal essay that's very emotional and very personal, or a novel or anything else, is the work of craft, which is really understanding how you take the raw material, whatever it is, whether it's from your imagination or from your personal experience, and crafting that into a credible narrative that is interesting and adds value to the person who's reading that. And I think that that's important, whether you're writing a tweet or a Facebook post or a full, multi-thousand word book or just a short essay. And for me, that's working on the craft element of it is really a way of showing respect to my readers, because I don't want my readers to be my therapist. I don't want my readers to just have to slog through what is kind of an emotional purge on my part. I want to honor their time by really investing a lot of my craft and skill and energy to make something that's going to be really more than just my personal experience.
Makes perfect sense, actually, and I admire that so much. And I like the fact that you're so true to your talent, meaning you've decided this is how I'm going to use it, this is the way in which I'm going to do it, etc. Because that's hard. Sometimes I think when people first start off in the field, they really lack direction. They're trying to find it, so they write anything and everything, go through a lot of, and this is another hot topic I like to talk about. It's taken me, I'm 48 years old, and even today I have a huge issue with rejection. I mean, I take it much better now, but like in the beginning, there must have been hundreds of rejections, and all I could think about was loser, 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 loser. Right. So speaking to somebody who's very accomplished, and this is more so for the audience's sake, to those that are first starting out, or those maybe who are in mid-drift and are like, you know what, screw this isn't working for me. What would you say to them right now to keep them going? What's one thing that they need to hold on to so that they don't necessarily run and bail for the hills and say this isn't for me?
I would say two things. There are two things. One is an old saw from salespeople, and they always say that every no gets you closer to a yes. So accumulate lots of no's, because that gets you, every one gets you one step closer to a yes. The other thing I would say is keep learning. I mean, part of why rejection is frustrating is because you don't know what to do with it. So, you got this rejection letter, but you're not quite sure, so how do I improve? What do I do to make it better? What do I do to improve my chances of getting closer to a yes? And the only way to do that is to have people read your work, tell them what's working, what's not, learn about the industry, learn about publishing, learn about what the magazine or the website wants. Really, it's not just about the craft when you're trying to get your work published. It's about everything. I'm astonished at how many people approach me and don't know the most fundamental stuff about publishing and about the industry they want to be a part of. And you have to. You have to be. You have to be really good, and you have to be really lucky, and you have to be very tenacious, and you have to have some understanding of who all the people are that are involved, because to get anything published, you've got to engage not just readers, but editors and publishers and all kinds of people. So it really helps to understand what those people are doing, what their job is like, and what they're looking for, and try and meet them on their own ground instead of sitting in your little office hoping everybody, comes to you where you are and says you're wonderful.
You betcha. Well, and the other thing, too, is we talk a lot about there's two sides of theories on this, because oftentimes we throw on the words literary agent, publisher, things like that. Some people have been fortunate enough to be able to find a literary agent, which is quite helpful in nowadays marketing in terms of a book, etc. Have you gone that path? Because I know that there are some authors that just literally refuse to use an agent, or just had such a tremendously hard time finding one. So again, to the novices, is it a necessity to establish having an agent in order to get anything published?
There's a couple questions in there. Yes, I have had an agent. I went that route. I went the very traditional route. I was fortunate in my graduate school program. One of my mentors hooked me up with his agent, who was a very well-respected agent. And we tried, and she was wonderful, and she couldn't get me a publishing deal. And all the feedback I got was the book was wonderful, but they just didn't quite know what to do with it, or they didn't, which is a very classic kind of thing. It's not necessarily, you can be super talented and still not get picked up. Right. You can have a great book and still not get picked up. There's other issues at play. What direction the market is going, how much money they think they can make, blah, 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 blah. So an agent traditionally has been the only way to get published by any of the big publishers, because there is no real slush pile. So you either have to know somebody, or your agent has to do the work to get you in, mostly because there's just so much material, and there's some people trying to bang on the door. So the people that can publish need gatekeepers. They need someone to sort of do the first round of sifting for them. Things are a little bit different now because technology and Amazon have made self-publishing very easy, and also you don't just publish the work, you actually get distribution instantly, and you can cherry pick all kinds of services you want, whether it's developmental editing or proofreading or things like that. But the problem is you still have the marketing problem, which is getting in front of eyeballs. And, when you look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of books that are published every day, week, month, it's very hard to get in front of people. And most people don't realize how small the stakes really are. I mean, the average self-published book, the typical self-published book sells less than 100 copies. A first novel, if you sold 5,000 copies, it would be considered successful. And when you think that you're getting a teensy-tiny piece of that, it's not, you can't really do it for the money. And now certainly there are plenty of people who, particularly in genre fiction of romance or thriller, that routinely sell over 100,000 copies of every one of their books. But that is definitely the exception, not the rule. And it is funny because I think because there's been some blockbusters, people in the world think, people will say to me, hey, why don't you get an Oprah? Wouldn't that help sell your books? It's like, I just forgot. Let me give her a call. As if it was that easy. Why don't you go get an Oprah?
My God, yeah.
Why don't you get someone to make a movie? Wouldn't that help if you have sale issues? Go get someone to make a movie. They don't understand how difficult it is to getting that stuff done. There's just so much competition and so much noise and so much stuff out there,
Oh, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. I found it intriguing. I see that in your as I call it, past lives, meaning that there was no other life before being a writer, but that's just my colorful look at things. I was really surprised that you were a partner in a landscaping firm. Again, that was kind of a surprise to me. I'm like, I don't know you that well, but I'm like, I just couldn't picture that. And I love the fact that you used to do marketing for a theater. I think that is way cool because I've been asked to do that before. What kind of experience was that? I was thinking about doing that, but again, it's a time thing. But I'm like, that has to be really cool.
Well, the landscaping thing was because my first husband had a landscaping business, and we were talking about, different ways to go forward in life, and so I decided to try working with him for a few years, and then we split up, and I moved on. The marketing stuff is really interesting, and I've worked in marketing and PR from everything from Planned Parenthood to a theater to Fortune 500 companies. That's all part of the corporate communications and brand consulting work and public relations work. And it's all super interesting, to take. It's all. I mean, I like it because it's the intellectual challenge of getting some material, and then what are you going to do with it, and how are you going to communicate with that raw material in a way that affects another person. Either gets them to buy a ticket, or gets them to take an action, or gets them to read your book, or gets them to read the next book, or whatever it is. And, what you have at your disposal is mostly just words.
And what I find interesting about PR is, and I work with a lot of publicists. Most people usually hook me up with my guests or publicists, and I find it so intriguing because there's always a new angle, a new creative out-of-the-box sort of thinking in terms of how to get someone's attention, which is cool. So I have to ask the golden question because I've asked about 75 people this, so I'll ask you since you're here. Somebody asked me to, because you're more, I do PR, but on a very rare circumstances once in a while. And so I've been asked to head up an entertainment division of a PR. They're opening a new branch. And so they were like, we want you to head up the entertainment side of things. So some people say that public relations is lovely and wonderful. And some people say, it's the pit of hell lately. So I'm like, that's a pretty big deal. So speaking to someone who's done this before, would you recommend someone take down I'm guessing that it can be as fun as it is frazzling, meaning being in PR full time?
I guess it depends on what your subject is. I mean, certainly when I was doing PR for a Planned Parenthood affiliate that was targeted by the extreme anti-abortion people who were chaining themselves to cars in the driveway and storming the clinic, that was not fun, not at all fun, but certainly very valuable and important. And you have a mission that's driving you. And as you mentioned, doing it for a theater is really interesting because the arts are fascinating. I mean, I certainly could never be a PR person for a tobacco company or something like that.
Sure.
I just think it really. I think it just depends upon who your subject is. In this day and age of politics, I certainly wouldn't want to be doing PR for any politician or government. Oh my God,
yeah. We stay away from those sorts of things. And luckily for you, young lady, I see you've contributed to various places, LA Times Magazine, New York Times, Good Housekeeping. Of all the places that you've done written contribution over the course of time, and not your books necessarily, what are some of the best places you enjoyed contributing to? What are some of your favorite subjects to write about that aren't in novel form, or I should say in nonfiction form?
I think the personal essay is really a gratifying form. There's regardless of whatever the publishing source is, because it's very interesting to try and take your own personal experience and how you feel about your personal experience and turn it into something that has resonance for other people and isn't just oh my God, I know what that feels like, but is I thought I knew what that felt like, but this is kind of a different take on it, or isn't that interesting, or what a unique way to look at this common experience, or I hadn't considered things quite like that. Those kinds of things are really interesting intellectual tasks to put in front of yourself, and I think the personal essay is a great form for that.
Funny, before I interviewed you, I said to myself, I wonder if this woman has ever been a columnist, because I could definitely see you doing a column, even if it was just once a month. Have you ever done that, thought about it?
I've thought about it, and the only thing that I think I could consistently have an opinion about is dogs, dog training, human training, things like that, and that's been a fairly recent part of my life. So I've been thinking about that. I used to write a design blog for a publisher, and that was kind of interesting because that was sort of a regular column write about various design things when I was doing quite a lot of design writing. So I guess that would be considered a column. And when I was going through cancer treatment, I was writing about that quite consistently, blogging about that. So in that way, that's another sort of column. It was in a loose sense of the word.
Of course. Actually, we want to talk about that. That was actually the next thing on the docket, as a matter of fact. And it wasn't, I was surprised, actually, right after your 46th birthday, of course, I know you were diagnosed with breast cancer and went through 10 months of treatment. So I have a large female audience, and obviously this is one of our biggest fears, I would have to say, as it relates to, it's such a, it takes such a toll on so many women and so many lives, unfortunately. And we're so blessed to have you, by the way. Congratulations on making it through that. I guess if there was one thing that you could share from your experience, because I know it's a large experience and a very frightening one, I imagine, people that listening in found out, lived through it, going through it now, what would you tell them? What kept you going? What was your sort of homage of hope there that got you through this whole experience? Because I can't even imagine 10 months of treatment.
I guess it's just believing that it's treatable. I think that it's inevitable that you're going to wonder if you're going to die, if it's going to come back, you're going to get through it or whatever. But I think you just really have to believe that this is a treatable thing. And just like you can, fall and break your arm and it can get fixed very easily, but it can also go south and you can get infections and weird things in treatment and, suddenly it's a broken arm becomes a death sentence. And, we do have a huge amount of breast cancer out there, and it's becoming, it's very, very common, but it's also very, very treatable. And not to say that it always works, but it certainly works a lot, and there's amazing doctors and incredible brains fighting every day to learn new ways to treat all the different kinds of cancers and to understand them. And I just tried to look at it as something that was going to get fixed. Fortunately for me, it did. Fortunately for a lot of us, because if you weren't here, then you wouldn't have all of these wonderful words and sentiments and thoughts and hopes and dreams to share with everyone. That's a huge accomplishment. Even better than writing a book, I have to say. I'm not going to take away from the fact that it's absolutely gazillionly talented, but the gift of life, I think, far surpasses any gift any book can give. That's for sure. So your actual presence is definitely a big bonus here. And you wouldn't be on the radio with me right now. Damn, wouldn't that be disappointing? Just kidding. I want to ask about, obviously, the books themselves, clearly. Talk a bit about, I found it intriguing, Henry and Rachel, about your great-grandparents. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because great-grandparents versus parents, I think it's different generational things, etc. Which came easier for you, the unraveling Anne or Henry and Rachel? I mean, obviously, I know they're two different books and two different stories, of course. But again, the generational thing, I think, is different. The bond and attachment is different. So talk about those two different experiences. And frankly, were you closer to one versus the other? I think us as authors have a close relationship with all our work, but sometimes more so with one versus another. Sure. Well, the memoir about my mother's life and death was very challenging to write for a variety of reasons. One, it was a highly personal experience. And memoirs are challenging because they have to be true, hopefully. And I know some people don't make them true, but I try to. And so you're working with actually some very strong limitations because you can't make something up if the narrative needs it. So you have, I think, a memoir kind of like a mosaic. You find all these broken bits and pieces of your life, and you lay them out on the table, and you try to piece them together in a way that creates something new that honors all the pieces but also has a life and a space and an artistic statement of its very own. The book Henry and Rachel was loosely based on my great-grandparents' lives, but it was a novel, and it was fictionalized, and it does have some, quote, true, unquote stories, and it also has some excerpts from some actual letters between my great-grandfather and my grandfather. But because it was fiction, it's much more freeing and liberating. You can make stuff up. You can do what you want. You engage, your imagination. So it's much more fun in that way. And of course, the challenge then is how do you rein things in so that you're serving the narrative. You're not just throwing anything that comes to your mind, into the book, into the soup.
Exactly. Well, and the thing is, your memoir, of course, which is so exciting. She won the memoir category for the Indie Book Awards, which is amazing. Hell, I can't even get people to buy them some of the time. Although I've been focusing on that. That's absolutely amazing. Actually, of the books that you've written, this is the one that intrigues me the most, is the memoir, of course, because I'm imagining that it's the most self-reflective, meaning if I wanted to know more about the person I was interviewing, I would read that book. That would be my guess. That kind of all spirals back to putting yourself into the course of that. Of the books that you've written, do you have a favorite? And it's okay if you don't.
I guess they're favorites in different ways. You know, they each have their own role to play in terms of what I like about them. What I like about them as individuals. You know, it's like sort of saying, "Do you have a favorite kid?" You know, they're all or a favorite pet or whatever it is. They're all a little bit different, and so there's different things to love about them, different strengths and weaknesses, and different things about them that frustrated me or challenged me or whatever.
And your typical lead time, do you find there is such a thing? Like, for instance, every person takes a different amount of time in terms of actually penciling from start to finish. Do you have a typical lead time in terms of how long it takes you from start to finish to complete a book or a novel?
No, the only thing I would say is that it goes faster than it used to because understand the craft and the process of making a book more than I, did on the first one. And also the first one was a memoir, so that was so much more challenging to find the narrative path through the material. But, and a lot of it depends on your publishing relationship and what expectations are from your publisher and how that's going forward and things of that sort. I know that people, again, who do genre writing can crank out 1 or 2 books a year, and I'm certainly not that person. Yeah.
And I also noticed that. Now, are you still an ongoing contributor to The Bark as well? Because I know that you were writing for them, and I think... Okay, got it.
No, I just did a couple essays for them.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just did a couple of essays that they published.
I've got
that's
you.
all.
Okay, got it. So if people want to look for you, would you say that it'd be safer to be reading the books as opposed to looking for contributions, or are you still doing essays on occasion?
I still do essays on occasion. I had one published recently. I've had a couple published recently. One was maybe about a year ago. It was on Good Housekeeping and Elle.com. And I had another one published recently about walking and writing. And, there's some other stuff floating out there that may or may not pop up. But, the books are obviously the quickest and easiest to find. But if you Google me, you'll get a lot of content.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look up. Yeah, if you just Google me, there's a whole range of essays and books and short stories and pieces of writing out there. So it's really whatever appeals.
And I know that recently, as a matter of fact, in August, of course now it's been a few months, but Beneath the Trees came out. So I would like you, if you don't mind, because you are obviously the surveyor of your own work, if you could provide a short synopsis to the listening audience about what Beneath the Trees is all about, and how has it been going, of course, because we always like to ask, because it's been a few months on the market now, then let us know how things are going with that. What kind of feedback are you getting?
Okay. Beneath the Trees features the main character is a wildlife biologist, and she's in her late 20s, and she lives up in the Adirondack Park of upstate New York, and she is on a search for some very specific things related to her work. She's studying the relationship between moose and beaver, and there's that aspect to her work that keeps her out in the woods. But then she is also trying to find a much more elusive creature, which would be a hybrid between a coyote and a wolf, and she's trying to do that work on the down low without anybody really knowing about it. And as part of her process of doing this work, she comes across all kinds of things that are very unexpected to her, which include some potential sexual harassment at work, the whole competition in the academic world, and also in the woods itself. There's some mysterious presences that are popping up in the terms of some things getting stolen or finding some things in the woods or popping up on game cameras. And so she gets this other mystery that was completely unexpected to her that she has to pursue. And all at the same time, of course, the real mystery is her learning about herself and her family history and her relationship to her mother who died in childbirth. And, of course, there's a romance in there, too, which has a few twists and turns before she realizes what she really needs and wants and what's the best thing for her.
Wow. Doesn't that sound like on the edge of your seat sort of, I must read this book sort of thing? It sure the hell does to me, as a matter of fact.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Have the audiences been reacting? Have you been receiving reviews? Has the good word come in yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, I would say that this is probably one of my most accessible books and straightforward storytelling. Most of my books have a somewhat unconventional narrative structure. They don't start from point A and move to point B and then C and then D and then E. They move back and forth in time, and they have many voices and things of that sort. So people really like the book and really been engaged, and are, as my last couple of books, who have kept asking me to do a sequel. I think people are very geared towards series and Star Trek 47 and things like that. So that's quite gratifying. And it's also this book is also connected to my previous novel. My previous novel has some of the same characters as this one does. So people were very excited. People who read north of here were very excited to pick up Beneath the Trees and discover that there's a lot of the same characters, and it's a bit of a follow-on, but of course it's standalone. You don't need to read one to understand the other.
That's very cool, as a matter of fact. Now, of course, I'm going to say to you the same thing I said to another author not so long ago, which is, of course, will any of these see the light of day on a big screen?
Well, I'd love it. Do you know anybody that we can send them to? I mean, that would be...
Well, yes, actually, I do.
It would be, well, send it away or tell me who to contact.
Well,
I mean, that's...
I literally... I'm a big believer, and I used to be I don't want to say just a writer because I hate that term because there is no such thing as just anything. But I started in writing, which led to radio, and then radio led to more journalism, and then journalism eventually spiraled off into other projects, and one of which is film. And so now a lot of my days and nights are spent either working with, dealing with, and now filming independent film. And so I do screenwriting, and of course I work with people who do this day and night. They literally convert things into movies all the time. And so I was particularly interested in, of course, your memoir. I realize that that's probably very painful for you in some regards, but I think it's an incredible story that should be told on a screen. I think it almost would be proper. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. There were some people knocking. I will say that there was some interest when it came out, but nothing went all the way, which is of course very, very, very common. But you're not the first person that says it definitely needs to be made into a movie.
True.
But it did nothing quite happened. But there was definitely some interest.
We're going to have to work on this. I'm not a can't person. I'm more of a I will, I can, this can happen, this will happen sort of thing. And I definitely
knock yourself out, girlfriend. I'm with you all the way.
I'll put that on the list of the 800 other things. I will.
Right, exactly.
But no, I will. I know what needs to happen with this, actually. I have an idea. I actually have a couple of people that I'm thinking about in mind here, but I did consider that, actually. That and the fact, of course, too, now that you just finished and released your book in August, what's on the horizon? Are you working on something new, something different, something we should be excited about? Not that we're not already excited about you.
Well, it's been I've been working on helping promote this book and make sure it gets out there and in front of people. And as I said, while writing a book takes a long time, and then getting to the publishing process takes a long time. So while I was in various stages, I did start another book, a novel related to marriage and relationships and things like that. And I'm starting to get ready to go back to that book, so we'll see.
That sounds wonderful. Absolutely. And if folks want to see you in the next month or sometime during the holiday season, are you going to be out and about, places where people can see you? You'll be speaking, signing, anything we should know about?
There's only one thing on the calendar right now, which is on my little island of Vashon, which is near Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to be doing a reading at the Vashon Maury Land Trust, which is really cool. And then probably doing a reading over in Bainbridge in early 2018. But that's about it. Nothing too major.
Gotcha. I got it. Well, except for the fact that your memoir is going to be turned into a movie. I just said that. Okay,
yes,
we'll work on it.
Let me know what I can do to help you with that, Sin.
That would be
have
awesome.
Your people,
and what,
have your people call my people.
There you go. That's right. Because I'm really important. You're really important. Let's get our important folks together in one room.
You're
together.
going to L.A., so
now,
you got to get the lingo. You got to get the lingo down. Have your people call my people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's never going to happen because I'm a New Yorker. I mean, in the heart, I'm a Wisconsinite right now. I'm going to eventually be a New Yorker. I ain't never going to be a California person. Although it will be nice to visit when it's like 20 here and it's not 20 in L.A., so I'll be excited about that. So here's a couple of quick reminders since, my God, this has been almost an hour already. I don't know how this happens. It goes like that. I'm like, literally, we get started to talk and it's off in another realm and here we are. I'm going to read off different ways to find you. When I get finished, please let me know if I've missed anything. Her name, by the way, folks, is Laurel Saville, and the website is actually laurelsaville.com. She has an Instagram with the same name, and she's on Twitter at Saville with a capital L for her first name, Laurel. She's on Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, LinkedIn. You can go back to thebark.com to check out some of her other work, as well as LA Times Magazine, NewYorkTimes.com, and Good Housekeeping. She also has a personal page on Facebook as well. Any other place that you're at? Any place I missed?
Just my regular website, which is laurelsaville.com, which is Laurel, S as in Sam, A, V as in Victor, ILLE.com.
And there you have it, my good friends. So this is what I will do. Normally I think it's about 2 hours after the show, the live version, which we just did, it'll be archived. So this evening I'll go ahead and send off copies of both this on Blog Talk Radio, and then I upload it to YouTube, so it goes to both different places. I'll also send out my contact information, and we can talk further in terms of the film side of things, because I do think that that's important. I don't want to forget to say this before I forget. Without Anne-Marie, you get Red PR. I mean, I don't even know what to say except we just met each other in this last year. You are the fourth client I've had of hers, and every single one of you has been polite, professional, courteous, chummy, and to say the least talented. I can't even begin to start. So thank you, Anne-Marie, so much for bringing me such blessings in each one of these four people. I cannot thank you enough. Laurel, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story with me. I truly hope that I'm able to take your words and put them onto a bigger screen, or at least get you to the direction where you need to go to make this happen. I'm a big believer in books are wonderful, but if everybody can't get to a book, they can get to a movie. And if they can't get to a movie, they can listen to a radio show. So I hope, as nothing else, I've taken your works and your wonder to millions of homes, or at least 60,000 on my little platform here. But I hope you enjoyed it. And please don't be a stranger. Certainly, the next time you have something going on or whatever have you, feel free to come back anytime you like.
Thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure chatting with you, and I appreciate your support of my work and spreading the word. And I do hope we can stay in touch, and I would love to pursue some screen stuff with you if we can make that happen.
Definitely. Like I said, we'll send the contact information over, and this way you'll know how to get a hold of me, and then we'll try to figure out and pinpoint exactly what you want to do and kind of go from that point. I love how people have these great things they put into a book, but if people don't get to it, they never see it. So it's just another way to get things out there. So I look forward to it. I definitely will be in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's a real pleasure. Take care, Sin.
Thank you, dear. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye.
Wasn't that wonderful? That was a double-decker of fun today. Magical words, magical folks. On that note, I'm finally finished. I'm off to go get my kiddos. Join us again tomorrow. As I said, we'll have another 2 interviews from 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock Central Time. Please join us tomorrow. Thanks so much, you guys, for listening into the show. I appreciate all your support. Again, Anne-Marie Nevins, she is with Get Red PR. Go ahead and check her out if you have any needs. She is an amazing individual with some wonderful talent. So please do so. You guys have a great evening. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.
When we listen to the radio, we never agree on the station.
Classic rock.
Hip-hop. Pop. Guys, quiet. The one thing we do agree on, we all want an awesome free phone. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 free phones of your choice from brands you love, like Samsung, Motorola, and LG when you switch. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Free phone requires port. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
When we listen to the radio, we never agree on the station.
Classic rock.
Hip-hop. Pop. Guys, quiet. The one thing we do agree on, we all want an awesome free phone. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 free phones of your choice from brands you love, like Samsung, Motorola, and LG when you switch. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Free phone requires port. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.